and I snatch up the manual to contact Will and the others, asking how their preparations for the items are going. I ask Will about the blood boil potion. Ask Baekhyun about the delay item he mentioned. Ask Chungha how many mutated fruits she has now. And ask 09 whether the biological radar sensing instrument can be finished within half an hour. I type at lightning speed and then quickly lay out my plan for all of them. In an instant, everyone grasps the idea and the urgency of the moment, and trade requests come flying in, one after another. One of them tells me to take these for now as an emergency, that they should be enough for a single operation, and that we will sort out future operations tomorrow. 09 reports the biological radar still needs to be soldered again, and will take another 20 minutes, while Will says the blood boil potion is already sufficient for one operation. The others gather fast and trade the prepared items to me at top speed. Baekhyun, however, runs into a snag, apologizing that the item he promised is still with his family and he needs to arrange its transfer, which might take another half a day to reach his hands. Another half a day would certainly miss this operation. Still, this whole thing was a spur-of-the-moment decision on my part, so it is hardly his fault for being unprepared. I furrow my brow, a little regretful, because with the item he mentioned, the one that extends immunity to the black mist, this operation would have had far more breathing room. But things rarely go perfectly smooth, and a small hiccup is normal. And with 2 days of immunity already banked, this accident is not fatal. I tell him it is fine, to do his best to arrange it, and that it is enough if it makes the next operation, since this time truly was a bit rushed. After settling Baekhyun, I quickly ask Will and the others how to use the items, and Will says time is too short to explain it clearly over the manual and offers to come over and run it himself. That works, I answer. Soon, Will and Chungha arrive beside me at the ant nest on the second underground level, where the sentry ants gather in vast numbers. I have already assembled the 6,000-strong sentry ant main force in the ant nest hall, and the moment the two land, their pupils shrink at the sight. Under Swift Shadow's command, the 6,000 sentry ants stand in neat formation, their dark green helmets forming a perfectly straight line from every angle, radiating a murderous aura. Chungha smiles faintly, gazing at them with admiration, and tells me she has far more confidence in the coming operation now, while Will nods gravely. Will asks how much longer until 09 is ready, and I tell him about another 20 minutes. Perfect, he says. We can use the items in advance in that time, and Chungha agrees. I nod to the two of them and tell them that if they need any cooperation from me, they only have to say so. Then let us begin. The items they just traded are piled to the side. The blood boil potion Will mentioned sits in a small sealed wooden barrel of 6 liters, packaged less like a potion than like beer. And Chungha's mutated fruits are individual fruits, entirely purple and somewhat resembling winter melons, numbering about 120. Chungha speaks first, telling me to simply let each ant take a bite, that the mutated fruit raises movement speed by 50% and lasts 6 hours, more than enough for an operation that runs only 4 hours total. The method is convenient, but the effect genuinely surprises me, and glancing at the fruit I notice it is only bronze grade. So I raise an eyebrow and ask how a bronze grade item can boost movement speed by 50% for 6 hours, and why I have never seen her use it before. She shakes her head and smiles, explaining that the mutated fruit was something she developed, inspired by Wang Hian, by splicing in some ant biological genes, to trigger its mutation. The catch is that its bonus only applies fully to insect-type creatures, and its enhancement for humans is extremely limited, lasting nowhere near as long with a speed increase of only 10%. She adds that she just cracked the cultivation problem, so she will hand me seeds later to plant in my own farmland. So that is how it works. I nod in understanding, thank Chungha, and quickly instruct Swift Shadow to have the sentry ants eat the mutated fruits. The sentry ants do not swarm forward. Instead, they lift the fruits with their heads, each one 5 times larger than their own bodies, take a bite and pass it backward. One after another, the winter melon-sized fruits roll backward at blistering speed, a fresh bite mark blooming on each with every turn, until the fruit vanishes entirely. In under 5 minutes, all 6,000 sentry ants have taken their bite, with a dozen or so fruits still left uneaten on the ground. A faint purple glow settles over every sentry ant, the sign that the fruit has begun to take hold. Chungha exclaims in astonishment that there is still some left, that she clearly prepared the fruits for exactly 6,000 ants. She marvels that the amount each one consumed was controlled with such precision, right at the boundary where the effect can take hold. Not a scrap wasted, almost like a machine. It is truly incredible, she breathes. The sentry ant's performance surprises even me, their owner, let alone anyone else. I feel a quiet flush of pride inside, though I keep my face impassive as I remark that the sentry ants are indeed excellent. After the mutated fruit comes Will's turn with the blood boil potion, and he asks whether I have any grain here, rice or wheat. Not much. 7 or 8,000 grains would do. To consume the potion, why would he need grain? Yes, I say, puzzled but not slow. And since I cannot exactly eyeball 7 or 8,000 grains, following the principle of rather too much than too little, I simply have the ants haul 2 large sacks of wheat from the warehouse. Will says nothing, draws his bloodthirsty battle axe, splits a burlap sack open with one swing so the wheat spills out, then lifts the barrel one-handed, pops the lid and pours the bright red liquid straight over the grains. The red seeps through the gaps, soaking every grain into a vivid blood color, and if that soaked wheat needed a name, nothing would fit better than blood wheat. Seeing the blood wheat take form, Will explains that grain absorbs and stores the potion beautifully, and only swallowing it and letting it meet stomach acid for digestion activates the potion's effect. The blood boil potion lasts only 1 hour, he warns, after which a state of weakness follows. He tells me to have each ant carry 1 soaked grain and swallow it when needed, adding that if a grain is not completely soaked to solid blood red, its effect on consumption drops sharply. I nod, filing his words away, and instruct Swift Shadow to have every sentry ant carry a single blood wheat grain. The tiny grains prove far harder to manage than the huge fruits, and it takes a full 10 minutes for the sentry ants, under Swift Shadow's command, to each tuck one into the crevices of their carapaces, those seams that look like dark green helmets. At that point, every sentry ant stands ready, and 09 finishes the biological radar at exactly that moment. 09 rides in swiftly on a black scythe hunting ant, draws a pouch from her beast hide waste bag, and hands it to me, telling me flatly that the biological radar is ready. At her indifferent tone, Will, standing beside me, knits his brow tightly and lets out a heavy breath, which makes Chung-Ha glance over a couple of times, looking thoughtful. Eager to depart, I miss the small exchange entirely and quickly take the pouch, the discs inside clinking against one another with a crisp metallic sound. I open it to find dozens of metal discs, close to coins in shape and size, and I cannot begin to guess what strange technology 09 used to make such unremarkable little discs greatly amplify a sentry ant's biomagnetic field and expand its detection range. Before I can even ask, 09 explains that there are 60 biological radars in total, that not every ant needs to carry one, and that one for every 100 ants dispersed in a net-like pattern will do. The radar's effects can stack and reinforce one another, she adds, at the very least doubling the detection range. Thank you, 09, I tell her, and quickly have Swift Shadow distribute the radars, so convenient to use and so powerful in effect. Once the arrangement is complete, there are fewer than 10 minutes left until 10 at night. Since several ant passages lead straight outside from the nest, there is no need to stage the sentry ants on the first floor, and under Swift Shadow's command, they divide neatly and swiftly into 60 small teams, lining up at each passage mouth to wait. They need only the hour to arrive, and at my command, the sentry ant army can pour out. After handing over the radars, 09 does not head back to her mechanical laboratory. Instead, she stays perched on the black scythe hunting ant, holding a small instrument, saying she wants to test the radar's data parameters, while Will and Chung-Ha stay too, wanting to witness this moment with me. Seeing there is still time, I look at Swift Shadow, standing ramrod straight, and tell her to send the sentry ants out to scout, but to remain in the shelter herself and command the operation through the species contract. There are too many variables inside the black mist, and to me every ant queen is precious beyond measure, so I will not put Swift Shadow at risk. To my surprise, Swift Shadow does not answer in her usual decisive tone. She freezes in place, seemingly unsure what to say, and I look at her silence with some confusion and ask what is wrong. She sways her body slightly and quickly replies that she wishes to go out with her kin and scout the area for intelligence herself. I look at her with real surprise. Although ant queens gain considerable autonomy after gold rank, whether from the ant race's inborn obedience or from the influence of my mutual aid contract, no ant queen has ever raised an objection to me until now. I never expected the first to do so would be Swift Shadow, who usually follows orders like a soldier. Still, I know Swift Shadow would never speak without reason, so if she objects there must be a real cause, and I ask her for an explanation sound enough to convince me. She confirms and explains that her biological signal detection is blocked by physical obstacles, so if she stays underground she cannot receive information from her kin accurately or in time, which is why she needs to go to the surface. This operation is critical, and her concern is not baseless. But important as the operation is, her importance is no less, so I nod slightly and tell her, seriously, that I order her to command near the exit and not stray far, and that if she meets danger she must return to the shelter at once. Swift Shadow acknowledges the order. Time slips by, and I pick up the manual to find it is already 10 at night, so I no longer delay and give the order directly for the full army to attack. The next instant, the sentry ant army streams out through the several exits in tight formation, and in a little over a minute, not a single sentry ant remains in the nest hall. I hope everything goes smoothly. The crisis of the eternal night is not only the black mist, since the mutated beasts strengthened by that mist are nothing to underestimate either, which is exactly why I have not rashly deployed the black scythe hunting ants. Before I have concrete intelligence, throwing the black scythe hunting ants out and stirring up commotion through open fighting would only backfire. Watching the sentry ants go, I silently offer them my blessing, then look at Will and smile that Swift Shadow and the others will be in action a full 4 hours this time, and ask whether they want to sit a while.